David, your presence has created narrative friction with our strategic direction. We don't need you anymore. I used to love Mondays. Strange, I know, but for 20 years, Monday mornings were my ritual. The coffee, the quiet hum of Slack messages as the East Coast team stirred, the scent of whiteboard markers still fresh from Sunday brainstorms. Novosphere wasn't just a company, it was the stage where I performed best. My name is David Haynes. I'm 52. For the past 2 decades, I served as Chief Marketing Officer at Novosphere, a fast-rising social tech company based in San Francisco. I helped build its brand from the ground up. Before venture capital, before app redesigns, before anyone outside our first 1,000 users knew what Novosphere even meant. I wasn't just marketing, I was memory. I'd been there when the first campaign failed and when the second one made the tech press nod in approval. I'd built a team from 3 designers in a rented basement office to a 120-person global department that made Fortune 100 brands take notice. And I did it without ever losing sight of one thing. People don't buy products. They buy voice, story, trust. At least, that's what I believed. That's what I taught. That's what I was good at. But something shifted when Travis came. He was 34. MBA from Stanford. Smart in the way pitch decks are smart. Spoke in metrics. Believed in optimization more than resonance. When he took over as CEO, the temperature of the entire company changed. The language changed. It wasn't about why anymore, it was about how fast. I watched from the corner of leadership meetings as the language of humanity slowly gave way to the language of algorithms. No one said it out loud, but the message was clear. Legacy is charming, but legacy doesn't and in their eyes, I was legacy. The new product managers didn't come to me for feedback. The new analysts barely knew my title. I went from being the strategist in every pitch to the brand guy they sometimes CC'd at the end of long email threads. One exec actually called me one of the company's founding spirits in a board meeting. It was meant as a compliment, but all I heard was ghost. Still, my team remained loyal. The younger creatives, the Gen Z designers, the TikTok copywriters, the junior leads, they still came to me, not out of nostalgia, but because I still had something to give, clarity in chaos. They said I made the noise make sense. I wore that like armor. Until it wasn't enough. It happened on a Tuesday. No build-up, no HR flags, no whisper down the hallway warning. Just a calendar invite. 1.1/Travis 11:00 a.m. e-conference, room 4B. I almost didn't notice it. My day was packed. Campaign review at 9:30. Global sync at 12:15. But something about the location, the room, the formality felt off. When I walked in, Travis was already seated. He wasn't alone. Vanessa from HR sat beside him, hands folded, like a script she'd practiced 100 times. I knew then. He started with pleasantries, performance praise, legacy talk. Then came the line, rehearsed and empty. We've reviewed a recent policy violation regarding content shared on internal channels. I blinked, confused. He continued, you posted a link to your personal podcast on Slack. As you know, our internal communication spaces are not to be used for self-promotional content. I stared. My podcast, A Quiet, no sponsor series on leadership and mindset, had maybe 200 listeners, mostly students and ex-colleagues. The link was shared in Leadership Digest, a channel where people routinely posted book recommendations and Medium essays. This is the reason, I asked, not angry, just confirming. Travis leaned back. This is the formal cause, but I think you and I both know this has been coming. There it was, the real sentence, the one that wasn't in any handbook. Vanessa slid an envelope across the table. Severance. Exit logistics. A checklist of things to surrender. I nodded once. Didn't argue. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't even ask for a last word. I packed my things quietly. No goodbyes, no, we'll stay in touch. Just a walk back to my office that suddenly felt too open, too watched. On my way out, I passed Julia, my former assistant. Her eyes were red. She whispered, "They don't deserve you." I smiled, nodded, but didn't look back. That afternoon, I returned to my apartment on the 17th floor. It had always been a pit stop, never a home, just a place to sleep between red-eyes, conferences, and campaign launches. Now, for the first time in 2 decades, my calendar was completely empty. No meetings, no emails, no Slack. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, opened my laptop, then closed it again. Even the act of lifting the lid felt loaded. Every button, every tab, reminded me of a world I no longer belonged to. Over the next 2 weeks, a handful of people reached out. Polite messages. "Thinking of you. Let's grab lunch sometime." But no offers, no real help, no whispered doors to slip through. Just courteous distance. On LinkedIn, birthday messages continued to pour in. Generic well wishes from colleagues who hadn't even noticed that I'd just lost everything. No one asked how I was. No one mentioned new roles. No one said, "We want you here." The silence was surgical. I was no longer inconvenient. I was invisible. They replaced me within 12 days. 12 days. I wasn't even done forwarding my personal emails before the announcement hit Novosphere's intranet, welcoming Aaron Wu as our new Chief Marketing Officer. Aaron was 33, former growth director at a gaming startup, polished, bold, full of kinetic energy. Her LinkedIn headline read, "Scaling emotions with data." That should have told me everything. The internal memo was short but enthusiastic. A new chapter in performance, first branding, a fresh lens on voice strategy. Aaron will be leading us into our next era of exponential connection. No mention of me. Not even a thank you for 2 decades of work. The first campaign under Aaron's leadership dropped 3 weeks later. It was loud, trendy, full of visual noise and hashtags like Real Vibe and Stream Yourself. It felt like it was designed for people who didn't actually use Novosphere, but just followed it for aesthetics. The comments said it all. "This doesn't feel like you guys anymore. What happened to the warmth? Did someone new take over?" My inbox stayed empty. Julia texted me screenshots from the internal channels. Some team members raised quiet concerns about tone, direction, user feedback. They were met with generic replies. "Let's stay aligned with leadership. Data will guide refinement." Kevin, my old analytics lead, messaged me late one night, "We're not building anymore, David. We're just testing noise." I didn't respond. By the second campaign, Novosphere's brand engagement had dropped 11%. Not a scandal, just a slow bleed. They blamed platform fatigue, blamed user shifts, blamed the algorithm. They didn't blame Aaron. She was still the future. Still data literate. Still new enough to be untouchable. Meanwhile, the team changed. Julia was reassigned to internal story culture, a dead-end role in most companies. Kevin moved to product ops. A few junior creatives left quietly, but no one said my name. Not in meetings, not in retros, not even in passing. I became absent. Sometimes I'd catch myself instinctively drafting copy in my head. Lines for features I no longer had access to. Responses to user concerns I wouldn't be allowed to address. Then I'd remember I didn't belong there anymore. And maybe I never did. Not in the new version of Novosphere. A place where brand meant metrics, not meaning. Where users were clusters, not communities. Where trust could be A/B test. It started with a folder on my desktop I forgot to delete. Inside was the audio file, the meeting, the one where Travis and Vanessa had let me go with those calculated words, that sterile tone. I hadn't listened to it since, but one night, unable to sleep, I pressed play. It was all there, the script, the control, the language that wrapped dismissal in leadership jargon. We've determined this direction is necessary for alignment. We believe a new voice is needed for this phase. This decision reflects our broader commitment to cultural clarity. But then came a sentence I'd missed that day, one that hadn't registered through the shock. His presence has created narrative friction with our strategic realignment. Narrative friction. That wasn't a policy term, that was political. They didn't fire me for a podcast link. They fired me because I no longer fit their story. 2 days later, an anonymous email landed in my inbox. No greeting, no sign-off, just a file attachment and the subject line, "You should see this." The document was a screenshot Slack messages from a private executive channel, dated nearly 2 months before my dismissal. Travis, we need to gradually phase out the legacy mindset. David is too vocal, too attached to tone. Culture needs a reset. Another exec had replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Someone else joked, David's brand voice belongs in a museum. I sat in silence for a full minute. Not because I was surprised, but because the confirmation made it real in a way I hadn't allowed myself to admit. They'd planned it. Not based on performance, not on failure, but on discomfort, on political necessity. I wasn't part of a company. I was part of an equation, and they'd changed the variable. Later that week, Bethany, my former senior strategist, messaged me from a burner account. "I'm sorry, David, I couldn't stop it, I tried. The shift was decided at the top. Not about you personally, they just wanted someone less human." That line broke something open in me. Less human. Didn't reply right away. I stared out the window of my apartment. The same view I'd once admired between campaign launches and 6 a.m. calls with Europe. Now it just felt like glass between me and a world that had moved on. Had proof. I had betrayal, but I didn't yet know what I would do with it. All I knew was this. They hadn't just taken my job. They had rewritten the story to erase my part in it. And that was the beginning of something I couldn't leave unanswered. I didn't plan it, not the words, not the timing, not even the headline. It started with a single sentence, typed out in the Notes app at 2:13 a.m. after my third glass of scotch. They removed me not because I was wrong, but because I wasn't obedient. By morning, that sentence had evolved into a 4-page email titled, "An Open Letter to Novosphere." It was raw, angry, brutally honest. Too honest, perhaps. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. The email went to every employee in the company, over 4,000 names in the internal directory. In it, I laid out the truth behind my firing, the podcast excuse, the pattern of exclusion, the strategic decisions I opposed, and how they all tied back to one thing: Travis' need for control. "You can't lead a social platform by silencing social voices," I wrote. "Our users don't trust algorithms, they trust human tone, but our leadership has forgotten what human sounds like." Then I pressed further, listing 5 major campaign failures under Travis's watch, complete with timelines, budgets, and engagement metrics that had quietly cratered. I even quoted internal Slack messages where concerns were ignored, buried, or dismissed with a thumbs-up emoji. I ended the email with a line I didn't even remember writing until someone screenshot it hours later. "Leadership without listening is just noise." Within 45 minutes, my phone began vibrating non-stop. "Julia. David, this is going viral internally. I can't stop shaking." "Kevin, my old analytics lead. Brave move, needed to be said, but are you okay?" I wasn't, but I wasn't about to stop. Uploaded the full email to LinkedIn with the caption, "For 20 years I helped build Novosphere's voice. Today, I'm reclaiming my own." Then I attached a zip file. Inside it, a 7-minute audio recording from my termination meeting, clipped, labeled, and chilling. In the clip, Travis could be heard saying, "We've discussed internally that David's presence creates Narrative friction with our strategic realignment. Narrative friction. That was their corporate euphemism for he thinks too much. I tagged a few journalists I knew from past collaborations. I didn't expect much. I was wrong. The post gained traction fast, 50,000 views in 2 hours, then 120,000. People shared it with captions like, "This is what corporate betrayal looks like," and "the human cost of rebranding." For a brief moment, I felt powerful. But then came the pivot. One HR consultant reposted the email with a comment, "This isn't courage, it's emotional damage control." Then another, "Air your grievances, sure, but not like this. It reeks of bitterness." A tech journalist I once admired wrote, "David was a respected leader, now he sounds like a disgruntled ex burning the house down." Suddenly, the tone changed. Comments flooded in about how unprofessional it was, how I'd weaponized insider access. One even asked if I had violated my NDA. I hadn't signed one, but the implications stuck. The LinkedIn algorithms started throttling my reach. New posts barely gained traction. The email thread was now being referenced in Slack forums not as a whistleblower memo, but as a cautionary tale. Julia messaged again. "Some teams are told not to interact with your post. Travis wants this to die quietly." Bethany, who had once slipped me documents anonymously, wrote, "I'm sorry, I can't comment publicly, I have bills." I understood. The press coverage arrived 2 days later. Bland headlines, lukewarm tone. Former CMO challenges leadership in fiery memo. Marketing veteran Chris Kramer christed strategic direction at Novosphere. But they quoted Travis more than me. He called my actions disappointing, counterproductive, and rooted in personal frustration, not professional ethics. No one quoted the part where I said, "I never asked to stay, I just wanted the truth to stay with me." Recruiters stopped replying. One wrote back plainly, "Given the visibility of your departure, we need to be cautious." The same day I got an email from LinkedIn. "Your recent content has been flagged for potential platform violations. Visibility may be temporarily reduced." I read it twice, laughed once. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, watching the city blur through the window. The towers of tech and glass I helped elevate, now looking down at me like I was the bug on the windshield. No cheers, no vindication. Only silence. And the inbox full of unread, unsent replies. That evening, I took a walk, no destination, just motion. The city was damp from light rain, streets reflecting neon ads from startups I once mentored. I passed a bus stop and caught my own face on an old conference banner. Human-centered growth with David W. Haynes. Someone had drawn horns on me in Sharpie. I stood there for a moment, staring at the vandalized version of myself. A group of junior employees from Novosphere walked by. One recognized me, paused, then whispered to her friend. They kept walking. No nod, no hello. Just that silence. The kind that follows people the world has decided are too much. Back in the apartment, I checked my inbox again. One message stood out. From Danny.Barnes@novosphere.com. Subject, "You were right." No body text, just the subject line. I read it again. And again. Then archived it. The damage had been done. And the truth? It didn't set me free. It just made me louder in a world that had already tuned me out. The silence didn't last long. A week after my open letter, headlines started shifting tone. Not because of me, because of the numbers. Novosphere's quarterly report leaked early. Growth had stalled. Daily active users were flat for the first time since launch. One of our key advertisers, an international fashion house, had quietly pulled their contract. Another brand followed, then another. The marketing department spun it as strategic repositioning, but insiders knew. It was backlash, not from my email directly, but from the confusion, the chaos, the brand damage we'd quietly ignored for months. I watched it all unfold from my kitchen table in Santa Fe, my only routine now reduced to morning coffee and reading the fallout of a company I once bled for. Bethany messaged again. "It's unraveling." "How bad?" I typed. "People are quitting. Aaron's team lost 2 directors, Julia got moved to a special projects unit, everyone knows that means exile. And Travis? Untouchable. For now." Travis had the board. He had the data dashboards, the stock projections, the confidence of people who didn't understand nuance but loved keywords like efficiency and disruption. But internally, the story was different. Employees stopped believing. There was a Slack channel once called Brand Magic. It used to be where we shared success stories, good PR, community love. Now, it was dead. Nobody posted, not even emojis. The silence in that channel said more than any press release ever could. I didn't enjoy any of it, not really. When you watch something you helped build start to rot, there's no satisfaction, just ache, like watching a former lover lose themselves to addiction. You want to intervene, but you know they'd resent you more for the rescue than for walking away. One morning, I opened a private browser and searched my own name again. The top result was still the LinkedIn post. Under it, a Quora thread titled, "Is David Haynes Done in Tech?" I didn't click. Somehow, that question haunted more than any insult. Later that week, someone from the legal team forwarded me a formal notice. Novasphere had completed an internal ethics review regarding my email and LinkedIn post. No action would be taken. It was the corporate equivalent of a middle finger with a polite smile. But something else arrived too. A copy of a new onboarding slide deck for the marketing team. Julia had slipped it to me. In it, the tone had shifted. No more words like human intuition, emotional resonance, or story-driven growth. Now, it was all predictive modeling, persona algorithms, and behavioral funnel targeting, a marketing playbook that looked like it had been written by a spreadsheet. I stared at the slides, then at my own hands. The same hands that had once sketched brand maps on napkins, not code. They'd erased every trace of me. That Friday, I received a calendar invite. It wasn't real, just a recurring calendar notification from a year ago. A weekly sync I used to have with my team, Friday Wrap and Team Pulse. It hit me harder than expected. At 4 p.m., I poured myself a drink and sat at the dining table. I opened a blank document, just titled it, "Everything I Remember." I started typing. I wrote about our first product launch party, when Travis was still an external consultant and didn't know how to pronounce engagement churn. I wrote about Julia's father passing the night before our biggest ad campaign and how she still showed up with swollen eyes and unstoppable grit. I wrote about the time Kevin rewired an entire analytics model overnight because a junior analyst mistake would have cost us $3 million, 0 cents in misallocated. None of that made the news. None of it showed up in the dashboards. But it was the real Novasphere, and now it was gone. 2 weeks later, a startup founder I once mentored reached out. "I read your post. Didn't agree with the tone, but I get why you did it. Do you want to consult for us? Just for 3 months, help us not become Novasphere." I paused, then declined. I wasn't ready to be anyone's example yet. Not for how to lead, and certainly not for how to burn down bridges, even when they were already cracking. That night, I lit a fire in the backyard pit. A crisp New Mexico breeze swept through the hills, stars prickling above like reminders of how small all this corporate noise really was. I tossed the printout of my Novasphere termination notice into the flames. The paper curled and blackened, but my name stayed visible for a few seconds longer than the rest. 1 year had passed. Not since I got fired. Not since I wrote the email. But since the last time someone introduced me as David Haynes, CMO of Novasphere, didn't happen abruptly. The fading of a title never does. It was more like erosion, soft, invisible, but relentless. The first signs came slowly. Recruiters stopped calling. Industry contacts shifted to seen with no reply. LinkedIn reach plummeted from thousands of reactions to a lonely handful of likes. From strangers in peripheral fields, HR managers from South Africa, a UX designer in Warsaw, people who hadn't seen the email, or didn't care. And then even they stopped engaging. I had gone from someone whose opinion moved budgets to someone whose opinions made other people nervous. One startup founder I mentored years ago messaged, "You should do a TED Talk about all this, but maybe not yet. Let things cool off first." That phrase stayed with me for days. Let things cool off. As if truth had a cooling period. As if pain needed to be pre-approved. So I let go. I moved to Santa Fe in September. The apartment was modest. 2 bedrooms, wooden floors, view of the desert hills. A neighbor said, "I just missed the monsoon season." I told him I didn't mind. I liked the dryness. It matched the inside of me. I bought furniture from second-hand shops, bookshelves without books yet, a desk without purpose, a couch no one else sat on, and I slept with the window open, more out of habit than need. The mornings came quietly. No meetings, no decks, no Slack threads. I didn't set alarms, but I still woke at 6:30 a.m. Muscle memory is stronger than grief. I'd make coffee in silence. Scroll the news. Read a line or two of a book, then forget what I'd just read. Some days, I didn't shower until afternoon. Some days, I didn't speak out loud at all. When you've led global campaigns and coordinated 5 regions at once, the stillness isn't peace, it's whiplash. And yet, I stayed. The first painting happened by accident. My wife Marie, before she passed, used to paint landscapes. When she got tired of airports and keynote stages, she turned to colors. We'd built an entire studio in our last house, but after she died, I'd packed it all away. In Santa Fe, I unpacked one box labeled Marie's Studio, Fragile. Inside were her brushes, half-dried paints, a few blank canvases, untouched. I didn't cry, not then. Instead, I set one canvas on the desk and dipped a brush in the thinnest blue. No form, no plan, just motion. I didn't try to be good. I didn't even try to be honest. I just painted a horizon, a road, and somewhere in the distance, a single telephone pole leaning left. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A few weeks later, I opened a blog. Not under my name, not even on LinkedIn, just a basic WordPress with no profile picture and a vague title. After the conference room, every Friday I posted. Nothing flashy, no hot takes, just thoughts. About leadership, about what it felt like to become irrelevant overnight. About things no one warned me. That leaving a company feels like losing a language. That silence can feel louder than applause. That no one teaches you how to have purpose when no one's watching. I never shared the blog link, didn't care for views, but some posts caught on, organically, a retweet here, a mention in a private Slack group there. Monday, someone commented, "This sounds like David Haynes, the CMO from Novosphere. Is it you?" I didn't reply, but I didn't delete the comment either. A week later, another, "Whoever you are, please don't stop writing." I had stopped checking LinkedIn regularly, but sometimes curiosity got the better of me. One morning in December, I log in. The most recent mention of my name came from a college student's marketing thesis titled, "The Voice of Leadership in a Data-Driven World." It cited me twice, once from a podcast I recorded 5 years ago, and once from the open letter I'd posted before being blacklisted. Haynes argued that leadership isn't just about results, it's about resonance. His fall from grace reminds us how little space the industry gives for emotional truth. I sat in silence for 10 minutes, not sure what to feel. Then I printed out the PDF, folded it neatly, and slipped it into the same drawer where I kept Marie's favorite brush. Christmas came and went. No cards, no obligations. Just one email from Bethany. It's weird without you. Not worse, just weirder. Travis still plays the calm visionary act, but even the interns don't believe it anymore. There's no soul left in the brand. I read it twice. Getting a reply. There was nothing to say, nothing that wouldn't make it about me again. And I'd made enough noise for a lifetime. Spring in Santa Fe is gentle. The winds are soft, the air begins to smell faintly of cedar and dry sage. I started hiking more, alone. Sometimes I brought a sketch pad, most days I didn't. I saw 2 coyotes once, early morning, standing still on a ridge, watching, not afraid. They reminded me of myself. Exiled, maybe, but not broken. Still present. One afternoon in April, I received a package. No sender name, just a return address in San Francisco. Inside was a book, Designing for Trust in the Digital Age. Tucked into the front page, a note. Professor assigned this for class. Chapter 6 was yours, word for word. From a talk you gave in Berlin 2016. I recognized your voice instantly. We still remember, even if the industry did. I didn't cry, but I placed the book on my desk, beside Marie's brushes and the thesis printout. A quiet little altar to what once was. Some nights, I still dream in boardrooms. I hear Travis's voice, smooth, shallow, full of authority, and none of the weight. Sometimes I wake up mid-presentation, defending a campaign that will never launch. I turn on the light, get water, sit by the window, watch the desert sleep. And I breathe, because I'm still here. Not needed, not celebrated, but still here. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. There's a kind of success no one applauds. The kind where you rebuild yourself not into who you were, but into someone who can live with who you became. People used to call me a source of inspiration. They said I gave voice to teams, that I understood customers like old friends, that I stood for something. But when I finally spoke my truth, really spoke it, not in metrics, not in slide decks, but with my whole voice, no one stood with me. They unfollowed. They stayed silent. They watched the fallout, then quietly deleted my name from the footnotes of their success. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was too loud, too angry, too human for a machine that prefers polish over passion. Maybe it's true what they whispered in comment sections. Should have known better. And burned his own career down. But here's what they never asked. What happens when staying silent means letting the lie win? I don't regret the fire. I regret thinking the truth alone would be enough.